Ray Callahan unplugged his EV charger just as Trish Dalrymple strolled by with her clipboard, squinting like she'd spotted a violation in progress. The air still carried the softness of early spring, the kind that made tulips push their heads through the thawed earth a few days too soon. The sidewalk glistened with yesterday's melt, and birds tested their morning voices from the rooflines of Maple Falls. Ray, in his navy cardigan and khakis, straightened from the charger post and offered a neighborly nod toward Trish. She didn't nod back. Instead, she slowed her walk just enough to make it clear she wasn't out for a stroll. Her eyes locked on the charger box mounted neatly on the post by the curb, her brow furrowed beneath a layer of light foundation. Her clipboard angled ever so slightly as she scribbled something. "Morning, Mr. Callahan," she said, in a tone more suited to a dentist announcing a root canal. Ray gave a small smile. "Trish. Lovely day." Her heels tapped once, then stopped. The neighborhood's really waking up, isn't it?" She gestured vaguely toward the street. "We've been reviewing exterior features lately. You know, for consistency." Ray glanced toward the EV post. It had been there for 5 years. The cord curled neatly into its hook. The charger light blinked green, ready for the next charge. He shifted his weight, careful not to track damp gravel onto the walkway. "Consistency's good," he said. Trish's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Exactly. We're focusing on curb appeal this quarter. There's been talk about visual clutter. And this," she motioned delicately toward the charger. "It's functional, yes. But not very aesthetic." Ray followed her hand, then returned his gaze to hers. "It's safe. Up to code. I've got the old approval filed away." Her pen tapped the clipboard. Of course. Nothing's being removed. We're just identifying points of visual deviation. Residents have expressed interest in a cleaner street line." "Residents," Ray echoed. "Oh, you know how it is. Some prefer a uniform look." Ray gave no response. The silence pressed gently between them. "I'll make a note," she added brightly, turning to resume her walk. "Nothing official. Yet." He watched her go, her steps neat, purposeful. The clipboard bounced once, then stilled against her side. Behind her, the HOA newsletter peeked from the corner of his mailbox. Ray retrieved it on his way back to the porch. The headline read, "Spring Beautification Initiatives Begin." Below it, a note in bold, "Let's refresh Maple Falls, together." Back inside, the kitchen carried the faint aroma of dark roast. His chipped Route 66 mug waited by the window, steam rising from fresh coffee. He picked it up, cradled it in one hand, and turned toward the living room just as the FaceTime chime echoed from the iPad propped on the table. Maya's face appeared, haloed in backlight from a sunlit apartment somewhere he could never quite remember. Chicago? Denver? It changed sometimes. "Hey, Captain," she grinned. "Lieutenant," he said, easing into the chair. "How's life in Maple Falls?" He sipped. "Sidewalks are wet. Tulips are out. Trish Dalrymple has ideas." Maya's brow lifted. "What kind of ideas?" "She called my charger una aesthetic." Maya blinked. "You're kidding." He shook his head. "She can't just say that. That charger was approved, remember?" "I do. You showed me the papers. It was when I helped you hook up the extension cable." He nodded again, but the conversation drifted to whether the birds were back near the lake. Maya promised to send pictures of her latest solar install. When the call ended, Ray stood slowly, joints reminding him of his age. He walked to the desk by the window and opened the second drawer. Inside, files sat neatly labeled. He pulled one marked HOA, 2018, and tucked the newsletter inside. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added a post-it on the cover, "EV approval, locate original." Outside, Gary the mailman waved from across the street. Ray stepped out briefly to return the wave. He considered grabbing the trash bin but left it. The morning didn't require more movement. Later that day, as he swept the front steps, he noticed a familiar figure approaching, heels, clipboard, lavender blouse. She stopped short of the porch and held out a folded sheet of paper. Just a formal note. Nothing alarming. He took it. The seal of the HOA board was faint at the corner. The heading, bold and center-aligned, read: Notice of potential violation, subject to review. She didn't wait for a reply. Her heels clicked down the walkway as crisply as they had arrived. Ray stood at the curb a while longer, the letter in one hand. He turned toward the post, traced the faded HOA sticker with his thumb, pale blue beneath a fringe of ivy, still clinging despite years of sun and rain. Still here, he mutters. At the community diner, Doris leaned over Ray's booth with a refill and said, "You know Trish is pushing for a Serenity Garden? Sounds expensive." Ray glanced up from his folded newspaper, eyebrows raised. The ceramic mug beneath his hand had lost most of its gloss, and the chipped rim fit against his lip like it always had. He accepted the refill silently. "Serenity Garden?" he asked after a moment. Doris tucked her pencil behind one ear. Talk is she wants to break ground next month. Right on that open patch across from the clubhouse." Ray stirred his coffee with a spoon he never used. "What happened to lawn maintenance and potholes?" She gave a soft laugh. "Guess Serenity takes priority." The peach cobbler slice on the plate next to his cup sat mostly untouched. He had already called it too sweet but left his fork nearby, betraying his real intentions. A few booths over, Steve was nursing his decough with the slow patience of a man who had nowhere else to be. When Ray stood to leave, Steve rose with him and nodded toward the door. "Walk you out," he offered. Outside, the air carried a faint powder of pollen. The sidewalk shimmered with spring, and birds trilled from the rooftop gutters like they were rehearsing for something. "She floated that garden idea before," Steve said, adjusting his cap. "Back when I was on the board. Said it'd beautify the commons. Sounded harmless until we saw the itemized budget, engraved stone arch, iron benches from Vermont. $7,000, and she wanted it on HOA funds." Ray whistled low. "She calls it a garden, but it's a plaque with flowers," Steve muttered. "It's not about peace, it's about plaques and power." Back at home, Ray opened the mailbox and pulled out a manila envelope tucked between grocery coupons and a credit union flyer. HOA minutes, he recognized the standard font and clipped language right away. He brought it inside, made a fresh pot of coffee, and read at the kitchen table. As he skimmed through the latest meeting notes, one phrase stood out for its absence. No Serenity Garden. No budget discussion. No mention. He flipped through the last 3 months. Same pattern. Nothing. His phone buzzed. Maya's name lit up the screen. He answered and placed her on speaker. "I checked the board minutes," he said. "No vote. No record." She sighed on the other end. "I'm telling you, Gramps. She's not just planting flowers, she's digging control." Ray said nothing. "You still have that HOA folder in the garage?" "Labeled and stacked," he replied. "Pull it. I want to check the parcel maps again. I'll email a request for the land records." Ray moved toward the garage, flipping on the overhead light. The space was cooler than the house, faintly tinged with oil and old pine wood. Boxes lined the walls, each labeled in block caps with dates and codes only Ray fully understood. He reached for a bin marked HOA 2018 to 2020 and set it on the workbench. The lid gave a soft pop as he opened it, and inside, documents lay in pristine order: permit copies, invoices, newsletters. Beneath a stack of maintenance schedules, he pulled a single-page approval letter, stamped and signed in blue ink. He read it twice before setting it aside. In another bin, one labeled Maps Plus Parcels, he located the old plot maps from a town hall info session years ago. He unfurled them slowly, smoothing the creases, his fingers tracing the lines like he was reading Braille. Each square, each boundary, labeled and color-coded. Lot numbers in faded ink. His lips pressed into a firm line. These weren't just drawings. To him, they were puzzle pieces with secrets. Later that evening, after finishing the last bite of cobbler and washing his mug, he returned to the maps. A small corner of the map held a handwritten note, Parcel 14B, in red pencil. The same patch of land Trish had mentioned at a meeting once. The same place Doris called the Commons. But something about the notation didn't sit right. There was no stamp. No leaseholder listed. His phone buzzed again. Maya's text read, check Parcel 14B. It's showing as expired lease, no owner attached. A new sign appeared overnight across from Ray's porch, future site of the Serenity Garden. The letters were hand-painted in soft script, framed with a gold border and a flourish of fake ivy zip-tied to each corner. The stake had been driven into the lawn sometime before dawn. Ray noticed it just after pulling open his blinds, steam still rising from the kettle on the stove. He stepped outside without his coffee. The air had changed, no longer hesitant like early spring but bolder, with warmth blooming under the morning sun. Across the street, the grass in Lot 14B looked the same as it always had, a flat, patchy triangle with a crooked sapling near the edge and a small stretch where the mower always left a trail of shredded clippings. Now it had a promise on it. Ray stood for a while, one hand resting lightly on the porch railing. He didn't move until Gary, the mailman, offered a quick nod from the sidewalk. Ray returned it silently, then turned back inside and called Maya. She's posted signage, he said. Maya didn't miss a beat. Serenity Garden. Lavender letters and plastic ivy. Passive-aggressive purple strikes again, she muttered. Ray pulled his mug from the drying rack and filled it. The Route 66 logo had faded further, almost a ghost now. You told me once, measure twice, cut once. Time to measure, Gramps, she replied. By mid-morning, the HOA flyer had arrived, folded neatly into every mailbox on the street. It was glossy, trifold, and insistent. The front panel read, Spring Pancake Picnic, a celebration of renewal. The inside featured a mock-up of the Serenity Garden, complete with ornamental stones, a bubbling fountain, and benches curved in a half-moon. Ray clipped it to the fridge, not for reference but as evidence. In the garage, he hummed softly, Glenn Miller's Moonlight Serenade, as he opened the labeled bins again. His fingers moved automatically, parcel maps, HOA lease notes, utility sketches. He worked like a man laying out schematics, not simply sorting. He paused only when the afternoon light shifted, throwing gold across the concrete floor. The garage had long been his refuge. The oil stains were older than Maya. The walls were lined with old socket wrenches, yard tools, and a rusted fan that only turned when you nudged the blade by hand. Ray found the municipal parcel map he'd pulled the week before and set it flat. His eyes scanned the rows until they settled again on 14B. There was no notation of ownership, just a faint red pencil line around the perimeter. Later that afternoon, Maya confirmed she'd filed a request with the county for lease records. Shouldn't take long, she said. It's not like people are lining up to claim easement rights. Good, Ray replied. Let's make sure the line stays clean. The next morning, Ray ironed his shirt, more habit than necessity, and drove to the town hall in his truck, parked with precision at a meter, and climbed the shallow steps to the clerk's office. Inside, the air smelled of paper and lemon cleaner. A floor fan droned quietly in the corner. Behind the counter, Miss Granger adjusted her glasses and peered at the slip of paper he handed her. Lot 14B, she read aloud. Yes, ma'am. Wanted to ask about its current lease or ownership status. She turned, opened a cabinet, then another, and finally withdrew a dusty brown folder. Her eyebrows lifted. No one's touched that file in years, she said, her voice more curious than alarmed. You're the first person to even ask. Ray said nothing. She flipped through the pages, pulled out a typed summary, and handed it across the counter. Lease expired in 2021. Was originally assigned to the HOA when the neighborhood was still under development, but they never renewed. Technically, it reverted to municipal holding. Ray looked at the paper, then up at her. Could someone reclaim it? Well, she said, reaching under the counter, if there's no active claim, and no outstanding obligations. She slid over a fresh manila envelope. There's a process. We don't exactly get swamped with demand for grass triangles. Ray smiled faintly. I've seen worse investments. He thanked her, stepped out into the warm April light, and drove home with the envelope tucked on the seat beside him like a quiet decision. As he entered the house, he paused in the foyer, removed his shoes, and opened the envelope at the dining table. Inside was a purchase application and a map of Lot 14B. Ray watched the surveyors press metal stakes into the grass as sunlight filtered through elm branches, silent declarations of intent. Each stake drove into the ground with a soft metallic thud, followed by the faint click of tape being stretched and anchored. The early light scattered through the leaves like soft applause, dappling the grass with patches of gold. Ray stood a few steps back, hands in his cardigan pockets, watching without interference. Joe, the contractor Maya had found through a neighbor, straightened and gave a quick nod. We're marking the feeder lines next, he said, gesturing toward a clipboard tucked under one arm. Want the panel tucked close to the fence? Ray gave a slow nod. Less walking's good when you're carrying groceries and a conscience. Joe chuckled. You don't seem like the kind to sneak up on people. I don't sneak. I measure, Ray replied, his eyes drifting toward the clubhouse down the street. In the days since he'd filed the paperwork, Ray had received a simple letter from Miss Granger, formal, notarized, crisp. Lot 14B was now in his name, legally and publicly recorded. He'd written her a handwritten thank you note that evening, folded it into a proper envelope, and mailed it the next morning. Not many folks still send notes, she'd said during a follow-up call. We usually get emails. Or complaints. Paper leaves a longer shadow, Ray told her. Now, on the new wooden post freshly installed at the corner of the lot, a sign read. Private land, improvements underway. He had burned the lettering himself, block by block, into the grain. Nothing flashy. Just clear. Across the street, Gary stood by the mailbox, arms folded as he watched Joe and his crew stake the property line. He tipped his hat once when Ray glanced over. From her porch, Trish pretended not to look. But Ray saw the way her clipboard twitched. That afternoon, a new burst of lavender flyers appeared throughout the neighborhood. This time the headline read, Together we grow, the Serenity Garden is almost here. The text promised a groundbreaking event, community pancake picnic, and a ribbon-cutting ceremony, complete with invited press from the Maple Falls Gazette. The graphic showed the same iron bench mock-up, now set beneath cherry blossoms in full bloom, even though the only tree on the lot was a struggling sapling. Maya forwarded the flyer to Ray with one line, "She's going full theater." Ray didn't reply. He was busy with city permitting forms, signed in triplicate, filed online and by post, both versions flagged with sticky tabs courtesy of Maya. In the evenings, they worked at his dining table over tea. She preferred the laptop. He used pencil on legal pad. When Maya teased him, he reminded her that no battery ever outlasted graphite. She's going to try to paint this as an attack on community spirit, Maya warned. HOAs run on guilt and bunting. Ray folded a letter into an envelope, sealed it, and placed it in the outgoing tray. Then we stay civil. Civil's louder when the other side gets shrill. He sent formal notice to the HOA board, a quiet, courteous document confirming the new land ownership and warning against unauthorized activity. By Friday morning, a new wreath appeared on the clubhouse door, faux hydrangeas and a fabric bough in HOA colors. Trish stood beside it for a photo, arms folded under a banner that read, "Beautification means belonging." Ray passed her without slowing. Joe walked beside him, holding a measuring tape like a peace offering. You think she'll back off? Joe asked. Ray studied the lot, now neatly staked, flagged, and registered. Nothing solves confusion, he said, like a clean measuring tape. That afternoon, Deputy Morales pulled up in his cruiser. He stepped out slowly, greeted Gary, then made his way across the grass toward Ray. "Morning," he said, scanning the posted signs. "Neighbors buzzing." Ray handed over a copy of the deed, the HOA notice, and the permit receipt. Morales studied them with a practiced eye, then looked up with a small smile. "Looks like everything's in order," he said. Ray gave a faint nod. "I figured we'd skip surprises." "Appreciated," Morales said, then paused. "Expecting any pushback?" Ray didn't answer. Instead, he looked across the street, where another HOA flyer fluttered gently against the bulletin board. Morales followed his gaze. The flyer read, "Join us Saturday for the garden groundbreaking celebration." The scissors hovered midair, but before Trish could cut the ribbon, Deputy Morales lifted one hand, and a deed. There was a beat, a full, breath-holding pause, as the movement cut through the soft murmur of the crowd and the crackle of the sound system. The breeze tugged gently at the ribbon stretched between two temporary garden arches, bright fabric fluttering above folding chairs and lemonade cups. Trish froze with the ceremonial scissors poised in her right hand, her left hand resting lightly on the bough that framed the ribbon's center. The smile on her face stayed, but her eyes flicked to Morales. He stepped forward slowly, holding the deed in a clear plastic sleeve. His tone was neutral but clear. "Ma'am," he said, "before proceeding, we need to address a matter of property status." The murmuring grew. A child's pinwheel clattered to the ground, spinning once before settling beside a row of paper lanterns tethered to garden stakes. Trish cleared her throat. "Deputy, we've already cleared this event with the HOA board. This is a community celebration." "I understand," Morales said. He glanced briefly at Ray, who had taken a position near the rear of the crowd, a leather folder tucked under his arm. His cardigan looked the same as always, buttoned neatly. His face betrayed no emotion. Morales continued, "However, I have here a verified record of private ownership. Lot 14B is no longer under HOA lease. As of last week, it has been formally transferred to Mr. Callahan." A stir rolled through the crowd like a slow ripple. Ray didn't move, but Maya did. She stepped quietly through the audience, distributing crisp photocopies of the deed, the parcel map, and the letter from the town clerk. One by one, hands reached out to take them. A reporter from the Maple County Times raised her phone, capturing the scene with barely concealed interest. Trish recovered enough to lower the scissors. "This land has been part of our shared community space for over a decade," she said, turning to address the crowd. "We've held pancake breakfasts here, spring photo days, fall festivals. I'm sure this is a misunderstanding." Ray stepped forward then, voice even. "It's not." The audience turned toward him. Some recognized him only vaguely. Others, the ones who knew how long he'd lived there, straightened slightly. Ray's gaze remained on Trish. "Expectations change," he said. This one did. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Behind her, the HOA banner fluttered against the arch frame. Morales cleared his throat gently. "Construction or ceremony without the owner's consent is not permitted. Today's activity qualifies as both." More whispers now. Chairs creaked as people shifted. One man folded his arms, another bent to pick up a dropped brochure. Trish tried again, her tone sharper now. "This event is symbolic. It doesn't involve construction. It's a demonstration of unity." Morales remained impassive. "The ribbon stanchions are embedded. The banner posts are staked. That's physical activity on private land." The reporter stepped forward, camera raised. "Mr. Callahan," she asked, "can you confirm that you've taken legal ownership of the land?" Ray nodded once. "Documents are with the county. Anyone can verify." Trish stepped back slightly, still holding the scissors. She turned toward the folding table lined with lemonade cups. The children, sensing tension, edged toward their parents. From the back, Steve muttered, "Well, that escalated quietly." Maya stood off to the side, arms folded, eyes scanning the scene without a word. She didn't move, but her presence grounded the silence. The crowd, once cheerful, now waited. The clapping had stopped. The music faded into wind noise. A few chairs scraped gently as people stood, unsure. Then a voice, soft, older, said, "We should have checked the records." And just like that, the mood changed. One by one, neighbors began walking away. No outburst. No accusations. Just slow dispersal. A man took his child's hand and led her back to the sidewalk. Someone folded a chair. A woman dumped her lemonade into the grass. Trish, standing amid fluttering ribbons, looked out at the thinning crowd. Her assistant leaned close, whispered something, and pointed toward Morales. She didn't respond immediately. Then, through tightened lips, she muttered, "We'll handle this through legal." The HOA room buzzed with whispers and tension, folding chairs creaking under the weight of long-held grievances. The fluorescent lights flickered once before settling into a low hum. The air smelled of old paper, store-bought cookies, and the sharp bite of brewed coffee that had sat too long on a hot plate. Neighbors filed in slowly, nodding to one another in that tentative, quiet way Maple Falls residents had when something was about to happen. At the front of the room, Trish stood behind a portable lectern, a stack of neatly arranged notes in front of her. She wore a pale blue blouse and a pin that read HOA Proud, though the proud part looked strained. Maya sat off to one side, a manila envelope on her lap, fingers tapping softly against its edge. Ray was near the back, cane resting beside him, folder across his knees. Steve leaned in and murmured, "You won't have to say much tonight. Let the numbers talk." Trish cleared her throat into the microphone. "Thank you all for coming. I know there's been some confusion recently regarding Lot 14B and the proposed Serenity Garden. I want to take a moment to clarify." She was interrupted, gently but firmly, by Elaine, who stood slowly from her seat near the treasurer's table. "I'd like to speak, if I may." Trish blinked. "Of course, but—" Elaine stepped forward, holding a stapled packet of printed pages. "This is a summary of expenses pulled from our HOA operating account over the past 3 months. I was asked not to share this outside the board, but I believe residents have the right to see how their fees are being used." A murmur rippled through the room. Elaine continued. "We've spent over $2,300 on Serenity Garden materials, signs, flyers, floral rentals, and graphic design fees. None of this was approved in a vote, nor documented in meeting records." Trish opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Ms. Elkins, soft-spoken, always hesitant, rose from her seat as well. She held 2 versions of the HOA minutes in her hands, the original and a revised copy marked "Final." In the March meeting, Ms. Elkins said, voice trembling, "Ray asked about changes to the lot behind the clubhouse. That question was removed from the official record. I was asked to simplify the minutes, but this goes beyond editing." More whispers. Chairs shifting. Steve folded his arms. Maya stood next, calm but certain. "I brought backup," she said, lifting the envelope. "These are county records confirming the HOA's lease on 14B expired in 2021. This," she held up a second page, "is the parcel transfer to Mr. Callahan. And this," she raised a third, "is the ADA compliance code on electric vehicle infrastructure. Which, by the way, our board ignored when citing Ray's charger as a nuisance." Trish stepped back from the lectern. Her smile was gone. "You're turning a misunderstanding into a witch hunt." "No," Ray said, for the first and only time that evening. His voice was low, steady. "We all want peace. But not the kind that comes with silence." The room stilled. A woman in the second row cleared her throat. "What else don't we know?" A man near the wall added, "My maintenance request has been ignored for 8 months. But we got pastel flyers for a ribbon cutting." Steve stood. "I move for a vote of no confidence in the current HOA president." A pause. Then a hand went up. Then another. More followed. When the count was finished, the result was clear. Trish said nothing. Her face had gone pale, but her chin remained lifted. She gathered her papers, sliding them into her leather folio with crisp, practiced movements. She stepped down from the lectern, heels clicking against the tile, and walked past the rows of chairs, past the folding table with stale cookies and untouched napkins, and through the side door. She didn't look back. Elaine lowered herself into her seat, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. When Maya passed by a moment later, Elaine pressed something into her hand, a small enamel pin shaped like a pine tree, the old HOA board insignia. "It should go to someone who listens," she said. As the room emptied, a quiet neighbor, name unknown to most, paused beside Ray's chair. He didn't speak. Just placed 2 oatmeal raisin cookies atop Ray's folder and gave a small nod before walking out. The lemonade glass hit the porch and shattered. Trish didn't blink, but Ray did, slowly. The citrus and ice scattered in a starburst across the weathered wood slats, dripping between the boards in slow rivulets. The evening air held its breath. One streetlight flickered at the corner, its amber glow humming above a neighborhood suddenly hushed. Trish stood stiffly in front of Ray's porch chair, arms tense at her sides. Her eyes burned with something sharp, the sheen of indignation giving way to fatigue. "You think this is over?" she hissed, voice tight. Ray looked down at the glass, at the faint lemon stain spreading beneath the wicker table. He said nothing. Just blinked again, slow and deliberate, as if measuring the length of the silence she refused to leave. "I built this community," she continued. What did you do? You embarrassed me. Undermined the board. You turned everyone against me." He didn't flinch. She took a step back, the heels of her shoes catching against a loose plank. "You want your chargers? Fine. But don't pretend this was noble. You just wanted to win." Ray stood slowly, easing his frame upright with care. He walked inside without a word and returned moments later with a folded dish towel. He bent with quiet precision, gathering shards of glass into the cloth. Trish didn't wait. She turned sharply and descended the porch stairs, her steps louder than necessary, each one trying to reclaim some authority the crowd had already taken. By the time Ray stood again, she was already halfway down the sidewalk, shoulders rigid. The next morning, Maya called early. "Gramps, have you seen the news?" Ray was stirring sugar into his coffee. "Haven't turned on the television." Maya laughed. "You're on the front page of the local section. They're calling it the Charger Challenge. Article says, and I quote, 'A retired engineer stood his ground with grace and documentation.'" He chuckled once, barely. "I sent it to your email," she added. "Also, Ms. Granger confirmed it. Lot 14B has officially been designated Ray's Corner. She filed it as a public easement with ADA accessibility." Ray nodded, though she couldn't see it. That afternoon, he walked to the post office with 3 certified mail envelopes, one to the Municipal Zoning Board, one to the Town Accessibility Office, and one to the Maple County Times. Inside each were printed ADA guidelines, photos of the original charger placement, and the parcel history annotated in Maya's tidy handwriting. Gary, the mailman, raised an eyebrow when Ray handed them over. "Everything all right?" Ray just said, tying up loose ends. By Friday, the HOA bulletin board bore a typed notice, "Legal acknowledgement of private ownership and ADA easement. Lot 14 be removed from HOA common space records." A second page read, "Board seat vacated. Interim appointment pending." Trish was never seen at that week's market. Her porch light remained on, blinking in slow, uneven intervals. A folded HOA flyer drooped from her mailbox post, curling at the corners. On Sunday morning, Ray spotted her across the street. She wore a zip-up fleece and jeans, her hair pulled back without its usual precision. A rental trailer hitched to the back of her SUV. A single plant sat beside the front door, a potted hydrangea she didn't bother to load. She didn't look up. Just loaded the last box into the back and closed the hatch. The SUV turned out of the drive without pause. The porch light blinked once more, then went dark. Later that afternoon, Gary handed Ray a fresh envelope, smaller than usual, white with embossed corners. Ray opened it slowly at the kitchen table. Inside was a draft rendering of a bronze plaque, the title etched in serif script. In honor of quiet courage, ADA access and community easement, Ray's Corner. He held it for a while, fingers tracing the edge. Outside, the wind picked up slightly, lifting petals from a neighbor's flowering tree. He stepped onto the porch and swept the last of the glass from the previous evening into a dustpan. It clinked lightly as it settled. Then, as the sun slid lower across Maple Falls, Ray returned to his porch chair and began humming a Glenn Miller tune. Children zipped around the new EV chargers with paper streamers as Ray adjusted his folding chair in the shade, watching. They laughed and weaved between the lawn chairs and checkered tablecloths, the ribbons trailing like colored smoke in the spring air. A soft jazz tune, Glenn Miller's In the Mood, drifted from a portable speaker resting atop a cooler. Pies glistened under plastic wrap. Bowls of potato salad sat beside mason jars of sweet tea, and the hum of casual chatter floated across Ray's Corner. Ray sat near the edge of the grass, one leg crossed over the other, hands resting on his knees. His chair was old but steady, its aluminum frame warmed by the May sun. The new chargers stood beside him, their silver casings gleaming under light strings hung between wooden stakes. Above them, a homemade banner fluttered, EV Awareness Day and Spring Potluck, welcome to Ray's Corner. Elaine approached from the side, a shoebox cradled in her arms. She knelt at the small plaque mount already embedded near the lot's entrance and gently removed the contents, a bronze plate wrapped in cloth. She unrolled it with care and pressed it into the base. The engraving caught the sunlight. Ray's Corner, for the future and the forgotten. She stood and stepped back. A few neighbors clapped softly. Ray gave her a small nod. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. A few feet away, Maya mingled with residents near the dessert table, accepting compliments for the lemon bars she didn't make but agreed to plate. Steve was deep in conversation about extension cords with Deputy Morales, who had volunteered to direct traffic for the event, despite no actual road closures. When Maya returned to Ray's side, she carried a paper plate stacked with cornbread, baked beans, and a wedge of Doris's peach pie. I didn't ask. I just brought what you like, she said, settling into the chair next to his. Ray looked down at the plate, then up at the gathering. I said 2 kinds of beans once, he murmured. Maya smiled. And now we have 3. He ate in silence for a while, savoring the peach first, as was his custom. The crust crumbled just enough. Across the way, kids chalked smiley faces onto the pavement, and someone placed a hand-lettered sign beside the chargers, free charging, courtesy of Ray. After a time, Steve ambled over, brushing crumbs from his shirt. HOA hasn't looked this peaceful in years, he said. Ray lifted an eyebrow. That's because they're not looking. They're eating. Maya stood a little later and tapped her glass gently with a spoon. The voices settled, and a small circle of attention turned her way. I just wanted to say, I've accepted a position on the town's sustainability committee. So if you have ideas about charger grants or green space preservation, she glanced toward Ray. Or if you just think the world needs a bit more standing still, let me know. A few people clapped. Steve gave a thumbs up. Morales tipped his hat. Ray stood when she sat back down. He didn't clear his throat or ask for quiet. He simply placed one hand gently on the back of his chair and said, some things are worth standing still for. That was all. At dusk, the lights above the chargers blinked on in tandem, casting a soft, even glow across the grass. The bronze plaque shimmered beneath them. Ray walked slowly back toward his porch, cane tapping in rhythm with the fading Glenn Miller tune. From behind, he could hear Maya chatting with a new resident near the lot entrance. A small girl stood beside them, eyes wide as she looked at the chargers. She tugged Maya's sleeve. Can anyone use it? Maya smiled. That's the point. On a quiet spring evening, laughter floated across Ray's Corner as neighbors shared food, stories, and the warmth of being seen. What began as a single objection, a man standing calmly against misused authority, became a reminder that community isn't built by rules, but by respect. True strength doesn't always shout, Sometimes, it simply posts a sign, tells the truth, and waits for the wind to carry it. When we stand with grace and persistence, even the most rigid systems must make space for what's right. And in the quiet that follows, perhaps we find that the real power lies not in control, but in care.